Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're dropping right into a terrifying, pivotal moment in Bethlehem. We're looking at José Saramago's fiercely provocative novel, The Gospel According to Jesus Christ. We're going to explore this really profound scholarly analysis of the work and look closely at how just a single panicked decision by an ordinary father sets off this massive cosmic chain reaction of guilt, authority, and moral responsibility.
So, what responsibility comes with knowing? That's really the Socratic heartbeat for our entire case study today. I mean, think about it. If you have knowledge that could literally save someone, but acting on it is going to cost you dearly, what do? Does having more knowledge actually increase your moral burden? Let's just keep that question in the back of our minds as we unfold this story.
Okay, let's dive into this impossible dilemma. In Saramago's telling, Joseph, Jesus' earthly father, discovers that King Herod's soldiers are coming to Bethlehem to kill the children. And Joseph makes a split-second, completely frantic decision. He runs to save his own son, Jesus. But in his absolute terror and rush, he totally fails to warn the rest of the town. He saves his family, sure, but he leaves his neighbors entirely in the dark.
So we have this fundamental clash between protecting my child versus protecting their children. As scholar Elaine Pagels points out, this perfectly visualizes the fierce psychological drive of emotional partiality. It's that absolute primal instinct to save your own flesh and blood first. And honestly, it's a completely understandable human reaction, right? But, as we're going to see, an understandable reaction isn't always a just one.
Scholar David Frier frames this perfectly. He points out that Joseph isn't some evil monster secretly plotting the downfall of Bethlehem. He's just an ordinary, panicked father. Yet his intimate, focused love inadvertently creates a total catastrophe for the other families. We always prefer evil to arrive wearing recognizable clothing, but Saramago just outright refuses us that comfort.
Which brings us to a really crucial concept we need to grasp: moral partiality. Basically, it's when a natural emotional preference for your loved ones results in a severe ethical failure towards strangers. I want you to literally step into Joseph's shoes for a second. Imagine if your intense, blinding love for your own family meant you completely failed to warn your neighbors of impending doom. Does the purity of your love somehow excuse the tragedy of your silence?
Now, what's really interesting here is Mark Sabine's blunt assessment. He says love does not automatically produce justice. It's an incredibly uncomfortable truth, isn't it? We're so conditioned to think of love as this inherently, universally good thing, like a self-validating moral force. But Saramago is forcing us to realize that love, when it becomes too narrow, when it draws a strict boundary around just a few people, can actually cause profound injustice to anyone left outside that circle.
And David Frier builds right on this, noting that a loving man can commit a serious moral failure precisely when love becomes too narrow. This brilliant scholarly back and forth really illustrates the sheer danger of tribal morality. The exact moment we draw a hard line between ours and theirs, we make it terrifyingly easy to accept the suffering of whoever happens to fall on the theirs side of the line.
But the tragedy doesn't stop with Joseph. It ripples right forward into the life of Jesus himself. We're looking at this heavy concept of inheriting the burden of guilt. Now, Jesus was completely innocent. He was literally just a child when this happened. Yet, as he grows up, he eventually learns the horrific truth. His survival cost the lives of all the other children in Bethlehem. He inherits a story he had absolutely no part in creating.
So, the crucial point is exactly what David Frier argues. Jesus isn't retroactively guilty for what Joseph did, but the very second he gains this knowledge, his innocence is forever complicated. He can no longer just throw his hands up and say, "I didn't know." He's now burdened with the massive responsibility of what to do with that devastating truth moving forward.
Let's see how this burden really builds across the narrative. We can track this clear progression of knowledge. First, Joseph knows, and he fails to act fully to save everyone. Second, Jesus knows, and he loses his innocence, carrying the weight of that survival. And third, God knows, as the grand architect planning all of history. We're consciously scaling up here, going from a micro-human tragedy to a macro-cosmic precedent.
Which brings us to a massive, practically table-silencing theological escalation. If greater knowledge creates greater responsibility for a human, why would infinite knowledge create less for God? Saramago's is taking the exact same moral standard we just applied to a frightened ordinary father, and he's pushing it all the way up to divine authority.
And this brilliantly illustrates Saramago's literary trap.
Think about Joseph's defense. A good outcome occurred, right? Jesus survived. Well, God's defense, later in the novel, when he's explaining history, is structurally identical. A good outcome occurs, meaning faith, hope, and communities are built across the centuries. God is now on trial within the story, being judged by the exact same standard. If the ends don't justify the means for Joseph, do they for God?
The scholars outline the profound danger of this greater good argument. Basically, as the scale grows, individuals just sort of recede. Future good is used to justify present sacrifice, and authority entirely escapes accountability. I mean, if a political leader used this logic today, sacrificing innocent people right now for some glorious future tomorrow, we'd call it tyranny, wouldn't we? So for promised future good cannot absolve Joseph's inaction, we really have to rigorously question if it absolves divine authority.
I absolutely love this quote from Carlos Reis. It just hits with such intensity. If future good cannot absolve Joseph, why should future good automatically absolve God? Wow. Saramago masterfully forces his readers to completely rethink the fundamental relationship between authority and suffering. He basically strips away the protective shield of sacred language and demands pure, unadulterated moral consistency, no matter how high up the chain of command we go.
We're going to wrap up our analysis of this first topic with a lingering, provocative thought that takes the burden of knowledge off the characters and places it squarely onto you. Once you know someone else may suffer, what does knowing require you to do? When you see that gap between what is right and what is comfortable, how do you respond?
Now keep in mind, this explainer only covered topic 1 of this incredible scholarly breakdown. To explore the rest of their fascinating debate, including the arguments around whether Mary Magdalene is actually the novel's true moral center, and some really profound questions around free will, you absolutely must read the full article. Head over to imaginarytalks.com/The Gospel According to Jesus Christ Explained by Top Scholars to dive deeper into all the scholars' amazing insights. Thanks so much for learning with me today.